been a graphic I've seen going around, posted a few different places on Facebook that I thought was pretty good. It's about summer running, which most runners don't really like summer running. Some do. But this started with, reminder, we're only about here, summer. Then it's still summer. Then it's summer when you wish it was winter. Then it's still summer. Summer again. Fall. Nope, still summer. Fall for some days, but mostly summer. 1 week of fall, then winter. Go up to the top, winter, spring, then summer comes again, and that entire cycle repeats. And as I said, a lot of people, even though they don't necessarily like running in sub-zero weather in the winter, don't like it in the summer. It tends to be hot and or humid depending upon where you are. So let's talk about what and you can do about that. If anything, you can. Well, first, you can adjust for conditions. We'll get into that. The other thing is make sure that you start and stay hydrated. So you have to start hydrated, because if you're behind the game when you start, you're not going to keep up. And make sure you stay hydrated. You don't need to replace on the run everything you've lost. So if you've ever done a sweat test and maybe you found out in a 1 hour run, I'm going to lose 1.5 pounds of fluid. You don't have to try and take in 1.5 pounds of fluid, but you do need to stay hydrated. But this will be more about the adjustment things. So a couple of reminders. First of all, running is not about pace. It's about effort. And running is not about miles, it's about duration. What really comes down to with the summer running is more the pace and the effort versus miles and duration. And that's where people, they don't care that it's warm, they don't care that it's humid. I've got to hit this pace. I'm supposed to run this and my race is going to be bad. But the fact is, when it is hot and or humid, the effort changes and your pace needs to change, because the goal is hardly ever pace. The goal is to give you a pace to get at some type of a particular effort. So when you have heat and humidity, you've got to change the effort, or you're going to end up running at the incorrect effort, and you're going to get the wrong training stimulus. If I remember, I will post a link to a video up here I have about why it is effort that is so important. So let's talk about blood, because this is why it's important. Now, blood has all kinds of duties when you run, but one of its main duties is blood is what is delivering oxygen to the muscles, so it's delivering fuel to your muscles. And of course, it's helping take the carbon dioxide out of your body up to the lungs to get out of your body. So blood's very important. You have a finite amount of blood when you are starting any run. Blood is also used to cool you and do sweating. So the more you have to sweat, the hotter your body, the more some of that blood is going to get diverted from going to your muscles to provide oxygen and fuel and take the carbon dioxide out to helping you sweat. That's why the hotter it is, or the more humid it is, the more your body's going to be taking blood and using it for that purpose. And that's why running is so much harder when it's like that, because you have less blood available to do that. Why you have to slow down that pace to try and get to the same effort, because you're going to have to do it with a little less blood. So one of the other things you could do, I forgot to mention, is also pick your poison. By that I mean, some people have to deal with heat and humidity. Some just have heat, then it's easier for you. But when you have heat and humidity, if you have the flexibility, typically if you run very early in the day, you don't have to deal as much with the heat, but you've got to deal with high humidity. On the other hand, if you run once the sun is way up, you have to deal with heat, but the humidity tends to be less. So I know people that run at noon, which to me is like, oh my gosh, I'd rather do it in the morning and get it over with, but they don't want the humidity, so they pick to run at noon. So you can kind of pick your poison. Now, before I talk about how I adjust for heat and humidity, because there's tons of ways to do it, let me tell you when I don't adjust for heat and humidity. So first of all, if it's an easy run, nothing with fast stuff in there, generally under 45 minutes or so, I tend to not worry about adjustments too much and just go run. Now, typically on a 45-minute run, I don't really care about the pace anyway. You can do whatever, but it's a relatively short run. It's not that big of a deal. If I'm doing fast work or track work, intervals, and I have rest. So let's say I'm doing 6 by 800 meters with 2 minutes of walking rest, for an example. I typically will not adjust my pace for that. Reason being, I'm getting rest in between. I get a chance to grab some hydration. I get a chance to cool down a little bit. I typically don't. It doesn't mean that you couldn't. On the other hand, if it was going to be 6 by 800 meters with, say, a 400-meter jog, I would adjust that because I've got continuous running and my body temperature is going to go up. I'm going to be sweating more, and I'm going to be dragging by the end and running those at the wrong effort. But if I've got interval work with rest, I typically don't adjust for that. So let's talk about how I adjust. As I said, there's many methods. There's dew points, there's charts, etc. The method that I use is first I look at the heat, and I look at both the air temperature and the radiant temperature. What I mean by radiant temperature is I typically don't have that. I'm usually done running by 8:30 in the morning at the latest. Typically the sun's not up very high, so it doesn't matter. But if you're running in a situation where you don't have shade and the sun is up a little bit higher and it's beating on you, the air temperature might be 70 degrees, 75 degrees, 80 degrees. But when that sun's beating on you, it could feel 10 degrees hotter than that, and you've got to consider that. So you need to look at the air temperature and what that radiant temperature might be, which ends up just being a guess, and you adjust 1 second for every degree over 70. Now, the reality of it is, if the humidity is low and it's 72 degrees, I'm not going to adjust by 2 seconds. I'm going to wait till it gets a little bit higher. But my formula is I'm looking at 1 second for every degree over 70 degrees. Now, humidity, because I live in an area of the country where we get humidity, it is 2 seconds for every 5% that the humidity is over 60%. So in other words, if the humidity were 80%, that is 65, 70, 75, 80, that's 4 elements, you will, of the 5%, 2 seconds. That is an 8-second adjustment if the humidity were going to be 80%. So I'll give you a few examples. Just a couple of weeks ago, I had a run. It was 80 degrees, but 55% humidity. So I adjusted by 10 seconds. The humidity was relatively low, 80 degrees though, so that's 10 seconds. Had another run, 55 degrees, 90%. I actually didn't adjust on that at all, because once the temperature for me gets below 62 or so, I don't tend to worry about humidity too much unless it's a long run, because you're out there longer. But in this particular case, I think it was like 75 minutes. I just didn't bother adjusting for that. And that's also to say that all these are guidelines, and you have to figure out what works for you. Had a situation, actually this was today, it was 64 degrees, 70% humidity. Now that should be 4 seconds. The reality is I'm not trying to be as specific as 4 seconds. I had a pace range. I just tried to stay in the middle of the range and not go to the fast part of the range. But it's not always adjusting. It's making some decisions on if I could talk, what works best for you. So, summer running can be tough. And I'm telling you, even with adjustments, it can still be tough. But it's a heck of a lot easier when you make some adjustments than when you try and suck it up, run the same pace, and then probably get the wrong effort as well.